There we go. All right. Welcome back, everybody. And let me share screen. There we go. Welcome back, everybody, to conversation number 71. Today, we're going to be talking about GA4 for analysis and experimentation, bear traps for the unwary, with Craig Sullivan and Oliver Paton. Thank you so much. We've been waiting for this conversation for a very, very long time. And before we get started, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. As always, let's start by thanking our first sponsor, Conductrix, who has been with us from the beginning. Thank you to the entire Conductrix team, Matt, Nate, Ezekiel, and the entire team at Conductrix. Thank you so much for sponsoring Conductrix. Ronnie Kahavi, who has been so gracious to offer a $500 discount to his very, very popular Accelerating Innovations with A/B testing, the online course. TLC members, you can get a discount for signing up. I will put the link. Let me copy that real quick. I'm going to put it in the TLC calls channel. There you go. Oh, that's really funny. Lucas, I just put that in a direct message to you. For everybody else, I'll put that in the TLC calls channel. There you go. And I will also put it in the Zoom chat. So if you use that link, you can save $500 on the Accelerating Innovation with A/B tests, with A/B tests online. Also, I want to welcome our TLC Connector newsletter sponsors, EPO, and we have a brand new sponsor for 2024, Chameleon. So thank you to our sponsors. We really appreciate you. We couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much. Next, I want to, of course, introduce our amazing speakers, Craig and Oliver. Craig has been blending UX analytics, A/B testing, and discovering toolkits for over 13 years, powering growth for companies like Google, Amazon, Spotify, Eurostar, Lego, I mean, kind of everybody, John Lewis, Facebook, and Red Bull. He's helped over 500 clients to unlock the latent value and growth inside their products or and services using a mixture of experimentation, data, user research, and cultural change. He's gained them over $5 billion in incremental revenue. Understanding data leakage is a specialty using flows of engagement, revenue, and customer delight. So, you know, he's all right. We kind of like him. Oliver is a master of everything digital performance from the media side all the way through to CRO. He created the experimentation program for hotels.com back in the noughties. That's lovely. I love that. And he created the experimentation program at including Sky, Vodafone, O2, 150 companies, BBC, Trainline, Argos, Nestle, Accenture, having now run over 5,000 experiments of many different flavors. He's currently head of digital analytics at Hastings Direct Insurance, whilst building out a rapidly growing side hustle that started off as a play area website, but is turning into an obsession, and y'all should check it out. www.radio-control.co.uk and .com. This is kind of fun. I highly encourage you to check it out. So I'm going to pass the screen share over to you, Craig.
No worries. And hi, everyone, and thank you for the wonderful introduction, Kelly. Let me get started. This image sums it up for me with GA4. I looked at this and I thought, yeah, welcome to my life in the last year, right? My boot stuck in a bear trap, right? It's just like, it's great. The slides are there on that link. It's in the TLC channel as well. Hi everyone, my name is Craig. I've been doing analytics data since log files and also since Google Analytics used to be called Urchin back in the noughties again. And my thing is blending UX data and experiments. But it's not just me. I work with all sorts of other people on projects and we do things like these. They're very interesting, but most of them revolve around blending qual, quant, and testing and humans, right? And what humans do together. That is all. So the title today is this: oh, you're walking into your GA4 into the nice forest and it's all sun shining and everything's great and you think it's brilliant, but no, ka-chunk, it's a bear trap. You've hit a bear trap. It's happened to me, it's happened to friends of mine. It's really annoying. So I thought, I'm going to show you all the bear traps I think you should avoid, generally for analysis, also for CRO, and one specific one that's really critical for experimentation. But an important thing that underlies all of this is making sure your tracking works. And I included this because tracking is so bad. It has been, it still is, and it is going to be unless we do something about it. Because as Simo says, there's one guaranteed place in the entire data lifecycle that you can pollute everywhere else with bullshit, and that is the data collection layer, right? You just plug that in and it flows everywhere. So if you have bullshit data collection, then you have bullshit metrics, and those flow up into big bullshit reports that everyone reads, and then a giant cool bullshit dashboard, right? This you're pumping raw sewage into the data infrastructure of your company and product, and it's crazy. And this is one reason is because analytics is not plug and play, right? Data quality is something that you don't acquire off the shelf. It's earned. And one way I like to think about this is, you know, if your car dashboard went and you needed a new one, you can't just buy a generic dashboard off eBay and plug it in. There are particular sensors in your car that are highly specific to your car and the context that your car is built in, right? That need to be wired up, right? And that's why you can't just swap dashboards around. And every car has these different idiosyncratic signals that are called sensors, but businesses and products have them too. And you need to wire these up to the dashboard. So out of the box doesn't work. It needs a lot of effort in order to get the reward. And over 95% of the setups I've audited, hundreds of them, don't pass because they have critical tracking failures. And if you haven't checked it, if you assume it's okay, then you run into the problem of you could be potentially harming experiments, analysis of your data. If you assume it's correct, then that's dangerous. So get the tracking basics right first and then work on enhancements. You should put all the effort into that first, only then enhance after you've got a solid foundation. Otherwise, it's a definite fail, right? There are some great audit resources here, some checklists, some audit tools, spreadsheets, walkthroughs, right? But these are not just to give to a junior member of staff and say, oh, if you use these, you can audit our setup. No, it's a discussion point with an experienced analyst, an expert who can use it as a review point rather than just a set of heuristics to tick off, right? So it's not a checkbox exercise. You need skill to do it, but it's a good place to start if you want to learn how to check your GA4 setup. But it's here to stay. It's been a hard change for a lot of people. Change is always hard. We've kind of taken this product that people have used and put a radically different product. Certainly in the UI, the data model is similar in some ways, but get used to it and take advantage. It's not going away. So investing in your skills here for optimization, you know, in experimentation and analysis work pays dividends. And I admit I'm still learning how to do things. I've figured out all the things I need to do on a very regular basis, but still there's a very long tail of things where I think, I have no idea how to do this, or, oh, I can't do it this way. I'll have to do it another way. So I'm totally relearning large chunks of all the things that I used to do with GA4. Get used to it, right? Understanding the GA4 data model as well as how internet browsers work, cookies and tracking, it's vital for this kind of work, you know. So whether you like it or not, there's the choice. When it comes to skills, you may find someone who's good at doing reports, good at doing configuration and tech and auditing stuff. You rarely find that in one person. I've found a few. So you may need more than one person to look after that for you. But with my experience with working with agencies and practitioners, interviewing people as well, this is still one of the biggest weaknesses, data proficiency, core data proficiency. So there you go. If you want to be different, put investment into this area, into your staff, please. In terms of following people for GA4, this isn't everyone, but these people I found to be the most illuminating, providing me with edifying insights into stuff and nuances I didn't really know. So I've learned a lot from them. And there are some great courses here, right? There are some expensive courses, you know, sort of multi-week courses, couple of grand, but there's some stuff that's free or cheap here that's accessible for everyone. If you, there's, you know, I do personal tuition, but if you want like group stuff, then there are companies out there that can do that, and there are examples on here. But let me get started with the first bear trap and one of the nastiest ones. So what is HLL, hyperlog log plus plus then? Well, it's a bit like programming language C, right? Put plus plus on it, it's like a better version, yay! But the evolution here was they called it log log, and then someone thought, yeah, oh, we've got a better one. What will we call it? Oh, we'll call it super log log, right? And then they were like, oh, what are we going to call the better version of super log log then? Oh, we'll call it hyper log log. That's great. So I thought this is brilliant. What's the next one? Infini log log, I reckon. There's only one way to go here, right? um, but
Puff,
for a
puff,
bit of
puff.
for a bit of history and explanation, you can start here with this brilliant article by Jason Packer, which is a bit of a rabbit hole. It's a great rabbit hole, but it's got a lot of the data and underlying science behind the HLL stuff. So if you really want to know the skinny on that, follow that, and also the resources that he has linked. But what is this thing? Well, we're always asking for user counts, like how many people saw this experiment, did that, or various segments of users, right? And we don't just like take all the users per day and add them up per month, because we'd end up with too many users then. Users come on different days, right? So when you kind of pull data, you have to do a dedupe on that to make sure that you're not double or triple counting them, right, in data terms. And what we are needing is to count distinct users, right? So number of people who came from Google or saw a particular experiment variant, right? And of course, we could go and kind of fetch that data in architecture terms every time, but it would be slow and compute intensive. So HLL is providing a solution here, at least from a reporting perspective, right? Because it's giving you an estimate of users, because it's a probabilistic estimate of user counts. And one of the things that's underlying this, right, is like Google wanting to save money, obviously, but this graph kind of shows it, because the red line here is basically the error rate is, you can see, declining as the precision goes up, but also the memory kind of allocation unit for HLL going up as well as the precision goes up. So understanding that there's a trade-off here inherent with using HLL means that you also begin to look at, well, what are the defaults that we get out of the box? BigQuery has a default of 15, although you can override that to get distinct counts. But the GA4 API and API for users is set at 14. And shock horror, the one for sessions is set even lower at 12, right? So this could be a problem, right? And basically what it boils down to, what it means is that if you have more than 12k users per test variant, so 24 for an A/B test, and you're going to use GA to store that A/B test data, when you ask for user counts back from reports or the API, you're going to get those probabilistic estimates, not distinct user counts, and that's like death for testing. And the worst thing here is right, it gets even worse the more users you get, which is like completely opposite to what we can want with A/B testing, right? So like, oh, we got an even bigger sample. That's great, right? You know, but here it's like, no, that makes it worse, right? It's just like the last thing that you want to be happening. And so what may be fine for analysis or comparing things in large data sets, right, is not useful for A/B testing, because we need that precision. We don't need some fudge. We need precision in terms of user counts. So how can you fix this? But before I get to that, it's worth mentioning, what is the practical implication of this? And this is from Jorge's article, and I cite all the sources and mention everyone involved here in promoting this issue. But the orange columns here are the HLL counts, right? And the green columns are the actual distinct user counts. And what you can see here is that all 6 of these experiments have been completely flipped. So you are believing basically that you have chosen to reject the variant, right, or implement the variant, but you in fact have made completely the wrong decision. And this is a great example of showing how HLL can completely destroy all that trust that you might have, right? So, this can be really bad. I know someone who's sitting on 2 years worth of data that was done wrongly like this, and they're quite scared to find out what the test actually said. So what can you do? Well, always have 12K users or less in sample, but come on, that's not really a solution. You can set up BigQuery. Oliver's going to talk about that. You can only use your A/B testing tool, but I don't like doing that. I like to have two sources with event and outcome counts so that even if they're slightly apart, I know what that variance normally is. And if they suddenly are 50% apart, I know there's something wrong with the telemetry, right? So for me, it's suboptimal not to have a couple of comparative sources there. You can also knit your data together in chunks using pulling the data for days and then knitting them together using a user ID, but that's like a lot of hassle. But there's more beef here, more beef with Google, right? So here's the core logic fail, right? Someone explain the BS logic to me here. You go to vendors, right, and you give the vendors the ability to integrate their A/B testing tools with GA4, right? You say, hey, vendor, you can integrate your testing tool with Google Analytics and send data to audiences in Google Analytics, and that's great. Yay, right? But it still uses HLL, right? So what's the point, right? When nobody's warning the users here, no, the vendors aren't saying, oh, watch out for that. GA isn't saying watch out for that. Why build an A/B test API to integrate with vendors if you don't even understand this? It's nuts, So the person who did this did not ask any of their statistics colleagues whether it was okay or not. And who drove this issue? Well, it was Jorge with two very good articles, Lucia as well, and Jason Packer. So thanks to all of them for writing about this, doing videos about it, and talking about it. It's a really important issue, and I think Google need to provide us with distinct user counts. Hello, Google. Next bear trap, thresholding. If you see this orange thing in GA4, you think, oh, it doesn't sound too bad. I'll just ignore that. That was my reaction at first. I'm sure it's been some other people's as well, right? But no, you shouldn't just ignore it. What does it mean, though, right? It means that data has been taken away from your report. It's not been removed from the database. But why did they do it, right? Because you have Google Signals on, right? This doesn't happen if you have device-based reporting. But you might have this on to get demographic data. You might have it for doing audiences and retargeting work, right? But Google have removed this data supposedly for privacy reasons, so you can't identify people. But that just like smells off to me. I don't get that one. But the worst thing is it really screws reports up or websites that have smaller amounts of traffic and data, right? So small businesses and stuff. That's really unfair. It wasn't intentional, but it makes it more harmful for me. So if your report contains user metrics, then thresholding will be applied, right? And if it is applied, it means that rows with small amounts of data, right? So less than 40 or 50, right? So you've been hitting this landing page, right, with some parameters and you're going in there to see if it's showing up at the reporting and the data's not there. And it drove me mad, right? And it happened to my friend Michael as well until I figured out, duh. So if you're working with reports with small numbers, that could be a problem. Watch out for it. Solutions, you can extend the date range. Apparently, it's going to be fixed on February the 12th, 2024. We shall see. I'm waiting with bated breath. You can extend the date range, right, to increase the user counts past the point where the thresholding kicks in, right? Or you can turn off this setting under admin data settings, data collection. This doesn't affect your signals data. You'll still continue to collect that. You can still use audiences. It's absolutely fine. Or you can export it to BigQuery, which Oliver will cover. You can disable signals, set up another property that doesn't have signals on it, or you can use device-based reporting ID, and all of these last two are covered in the resources on this page here. Julius and Himanshu probably have the best reading on this topic, but some of these other articles and videos are also useful. Cardinality, last ones. Cardinality is this other thing in reports. What's this other? Well, it's a spillover basically for when you're hitting a row limit. If you have lots of different values like user IDs, if you have a unique user ID for every user on high traffic website, you have millions of these. So if you try and show a report with those in it, it's like 1,750,000 unique values in there, right? So either it could be because you haven't cleaned and filtered your data, or you've got a lot of unique values every day. And Google says that high cardinality is over 500 unique values in a day. So what happens when lots of these unique values kind of collide with reporting? Well, the report has a row limit. So if all the unique values don't fit in the row limit, it spills over into the edge into a bucket, a holding bucket called other. And that's what you're seeing. So it basically means your data will not fit within the row limits of this report. If anyone knows what those limits are, because there's conflicting information on that, I would be really curious. Please shout me out on Slack. Fixes, again, use BigQuery. If you're using the standard reports, you can try Explorer, but sampling will potentially apply there. Standard reports, there's no sampling, but you can get cardinality. Isn't that great? But Explorer, there's no cardinality, but you can get sampling. Oh, it's a double whammy. You can avoid high cardinality dimensions, but that's easier said than done, or you can simplify the values. Filtering out query parameters on page dimensions can be a big help, and using inbuilt dimensions rather than your own custom ones can also help. Oh yeah, and of course you can pay for GA360. Some further reading there on all of those, avoiding and removing other in your reports. Sampling still there, it's still a problem. How do you avoid it? Well, you can use standard reports, right, to get around that. That's not always an option. Another way is to reduce the date range to limit the data or avoid high cardinality dimensions. And look, this option keeps coming up, doesn't it? Isn't that funny? Everything seems to lead to paying for GA360. What a coincidence. And there isn't a huge amount of reading on this, but Himanshu has the best article on that. Last but not least, not set, right? It's worth cleaning this up too in your reports, especially if it's particularly bad. It just means that the data's empty. And the required fix depends on which field is coming up empty. So if it's landing page, it might be the session timeout that's causing that to be higher than it is, or it could be extremely long URLs. For source and medium not being set, that could be tracking links, it could be audience triggers. You just need to do a tracking walkthrough sometimes. But generally speaking, there's something broken with the tracking or the way it collides with GA. So Julius's excellent guide in combination with a bit of a walkthrough will probably solve most of these problems. So that's my summary. Definitely learn to debug front-end tags and audit GA so that you can make sure that bullshit isn't flowing up through all of this. Watch out for HLL, get rid of thresholding if Google hasn't done it already. Avoid or mitigate the cardinality. Watch out for sampling and do a bit of data cleanup. Thank you very much.
Cool. Hey guys, let me just share screen quickly. I've got 3 screens here and I always end up presenting my emails by mistake. Give me 1 second. Screen 1. There we go. Let me know if you can see that. So as Kelly mentioned, I'm Ollie. I go by Ollie at least, except when I'm in trouble. I've been doing a bit of a video series on LinkedIn on tracking and Google Analytics 4 for experimentation tracking. I kind of got to episode 3, I think it was, before Christmas, and I've been so busy in COVID that I haven't really got to it, but I will get back to it. So if you guys want to go and check it out, I think they're on my LinkedIn page. So to start off with, a kind of, oh, hang on a sec. Navigation. Why isn't it changing screen? There we go. So I wanted to kind of dive into why you might want to use a web analytics tool. This applies to Adobe as well. If you wanted to use Adobe, it's a better tool, obviously. I'm a bit biased, but you know, I love Adobe Analytics compared to GA. You know, your reasons, I put together reasons why you would and wouldn't want to use your web analytics tool. So reasons against, really, your optimization tool has reporting embedded already. It does your statistics, doesn't sample, so it doesn't have any of these problems. And you will typically avoid analysis paralysis. So you won't end up looking at every single parameter under the sun. There are many more reasons why you might want to do it. So you have less tracking script on your website potentially. So just use one tool for tracking. You've already got all of those metrics and dimensions set up already, probably. On my websites, I track absolutely everything the customer does. So all of those outcomes are already tracked. It would be kind of pointless and superfluous to add extra tracking. I can easily blend online and offline data based on all of my offline data being in BigQuery or in Snowflake within my day job. And we have all of our GA data in Snowflake as well. You can track across multiple tools. I think I put this one in twice. You can validate your experiment tool accuracy just by having two systems of record, and you can do your own statistics. And when I say using multiple tools, I mean the ability to use lots of different experimentation platforms, which, especially in a bigger e-commerce business, you might be likely to do. As Craig mentioned as well, accuracy is super important. And I think off the back of what Craig was saying, the first step to knowing your accuracy is to look at orders. Orders is your absolute number that you have in your business. Obviously, sessions or visits could be impacted by cookies. It could be impacted by ad blockers. Whereas your absolute order number is something you should be comparing. And what we do in my day job is we take an extract on a daily basis. It runs on a stored procedure every night, and it does a gap analysis of what GA looks like versus our GA data. And in my day job, that's about 5%, but we still haven't implemented server-side cookies and things like that. So I think there's a gap to bridge with a first-party tracking system through server-side. In my side hustle, I get 100% all the time. So it's definitely possible. And you should definitely seek to make your system as accurate as possible, especially if you're going to be using it for experiment results. Okay, so really the way I see it is I'm trying to create a single flow of data for all experiments, trying to simplify it as much as possible. So the web page emits events, or the web page or the experiment tool emits events to GTM, and that flows into GA, which gets taken into BigQuery. And then off the back of that, we can automate our aggregate tables. And that can basically enable us to create a bit of a factory for experiments. So we can automatically, whenever a new experiment gets built and launched by the optimization team, you can automatically pick that up, get the A and B variations, pair them together, and create a report off the back of it. Obviously, your non-statistical investigations, if you want to do a quick deep dive into whether an A/B test has an impact on, by a specific dimension, you can do that in the GA interface. I would definitely advise against it, and I would add your dimensions into this kind of data mart process. But yeah, I mean, really the only way to do it in the interface, if you're trying to, because GA4 is event-based, when you send a variant ID, your variant ID isn't necessarily going to carry through onto your purchase event. So then you need to create segments anyway by your A/B tests. So it really becomes arduous to create, especially if you're experimenting at scale, to create a segment every single time for every single variant and then compare it and rebuild all of your experiment reporting. So I definitely suggest that doing it through BigQuery is a better way to go anyway. It's far more practical and far more scalable if you're looking to achieve volume in experimentation. So the way I try and set this up technically from a technical standpoint is to have a devoted event type in the GTM for experiment assignment. And I talk through that in a bit on how that's set up. Send all events on every page view of every session whenever that experiment is present. So if the experiment's on that page, always send it every single time. That allows you to see the number of times that experiment was viewed. And then skipping to number 3, so also send context variables. So within that event, I would also send your page name, your page location, your content names, all of the content within that page, especially if you have dynamic pages. And what that allows you to do is see the context in which that experiment was seen. So that allows you sometimes to debug the experiment. So if you have poor targeting criteria on your experiment and it ends up showing on more pages than you expect it to, you're able to see that automatically in GA. If you don't have all of those dimensions, then you end up having to create segments and looking across multiple events. And that's not easy in GA4 out of the box. It's possible, but it's not easy to do. Number 4 is send a list of experiments that have been assigned or you've traveled through. So let's say you have a sequence of pages, page 1, 2, and 3, and you have an experiment on each one, and you want to understand the combination effect of those experiments. What I would tend to do on page 1, you get an event, and the event says you're in this experiment, and it adds that experiment to a list variable. Then you go to page 2, you see the second event for the second experiment. It sends the variant for that new experiment, and then it adds that new experiment into a list variable. By the time you've got to your conversion point, so that variable passes through on every single event within Google Tag Manager, not just that experiment assignment event. So then when you get to your purchase event or your outcome event, whatever that may be, you have this list of experiments that the customer has traveled through that you can then assign and allocate your conversion to. And that means you can do one row processing in BigQuery. Really, so if you wanted to look at like I say, conversions for all the experiments or the other way around, all the experiments that experience for a conversion, you can look at all those different combinations.
Oliver, sorry to interrupt, but is this, I think Lucas asked this also, are you talking about sending these client side or server side?
Client side, yeah. Yeah.
So if you're sending a huge amount of data from the client,
yeah,
you're not concerned about, slowing things down. If I'm on a mobile device, this is going to cost the user money.
No.
Right? I mean, this is considered to be a no-no to send a lot of telemetry from a mobile phone, because what if I'm paying for my data?
It's not that much data. I mean,
I don't know. I mean, if I'm in an environment where you run hundreds of experiments, these lists are going to get really long.
You're running hundreds of experiments on one journey, maybe, but either way, it's not that big an amount of data compared to, for example, an image, right?
Ronnie, I think if
you
you run
an image into a web page,
you're not relying on GA anymore.
Yeah,
Sorry?
no, I think it's
that's
past
not the
that
target
point.
audience here.
Yeah,
Like, by that time you take it seriously enough to not use GA.
That's what I'm trying to frame. Is this advice for people who run a small number of experiments, and when it grows, you got to switch out of it? I don't think the vendors are saying that.
Sorry, which vendors?
I mean, you're talking about Adobe and GA here, right? Are they in agreement that you shouldn't use their product when you get above 10 experiments for a page?
No. I'm look, there's many ways you can do everything, Ronnie. You can send them all in separate events, or you can send them in a list. I'm just saying it makes it easier for analysis and combinations. Right,
in terms of the overall payload here, it's really rather small compared to the other stuff that GA4 is sending anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a relatively moot
this
point.
grows more than linear in the number of experiments. That's why I'm concerned about this. I mean, he's talking about sending all combinations of experiments. Ouch, that blows.
Yeah, but how many people are running more than 30 experiments in one journey? Not many. So yeah, I know you are, Lucas, and maybe Ronnie is, and maybe we are at Hastings, but you know, it's a relatively small number, and this does make the analysis slightly easier and more efficient because you're doing one row analysis. Anyway, yeah, so this is how I construct the event. So basically the data layer push would be an experiment assignment. You have the experiment variation name. It's far more convenient, again, and more efficient to do that in a code format. So we name and label our experiment variation names in abbreviations. This example of an abbreviation is your experiment ID, your variant ID, and an instance ID, which allows you to refactor the experiment should something go wrong. So I'd always recommend having an instance ID within your experiment codes. And again, the metadata that we pass on every single hit allows you to contextually verify where that hit happened and all the details of that hit. Okay, so as I was mentioning earlier, in quite a few companies I worked with, they run experiments across multiple platforms. You know, now I've been running experiments with Google Tag Manager quite successfully. You know, you might be running optimising, you might have experiments running in your CMS platform. You might have pre-assigned customer level experiments running in Salesforce. If you have that one event to consume all of those assignments, that means you can then singularly deal with the reporting of those experiments in one way. And that is a massive advantage if you are in a scenario where you're using lots of different platforms to do your experiments. Okay, moving on. Okay, just an example of how you build the list variable. Again, pretty simple. It's just deals with adding or concatenating the values as you travel through the journey. So you can see in this format, three experiments is actually a very small amount of data, and you could get to say 30 or 40 with no problem. Okay. Okay, then I was going to walk through some examples of how I've set it up in GTM. Just give me one sec. Yeah, so just show you how this passes through. So I've only got one experiment running on this site at the moment. Actually, sorry, 3. So again, this passes through in exactly the same way, and I will share templates on how this works in Google Tag Manager afterwards and share the slides. But in this hit, we're sending one experiment, and the customer has already experienced several other experiments. And then in BigQuery, basically what we then have to do, or what we can do, again, there's many other ways. I'm sure Ronnie and Lucas can come up with lots of different ways that this can be done. Basically, what I'm doing is coalescing the custom dimension that I'm using to bring back the right column, and then able to look for the to flatten the table and bring back just the variables that I need. So in this case, it's quite a simple set of assignments. So I'm creating an assignments table, or CTE. I'm also creating a conversion CTE, and then I'm joining them together. And then in this view, which makes it really easy for you to pull the data and visualize it in Looker Studio, what I'm then doing is creating transferring it into columns for each variant. So I've got users, conversions, conversions. And then I've got cumulative users, conversions, conversions. So what this allows me to do is create in Looker Studio, which I'm not going to show you today because I haven't got that far myself, and it will be in the 5th episode of the video sessions that I'm doing on LinkedIn. Basically, what I'll then be able to do is create your classic either box and whisker chart, which gives you the cumulative view of the experiment day by day. And in this section, in data transfers, what you're able to do in BigQuery is basically run this every day. So what you would do is you'd create the query, you'd have either a static, you can have a static, you can have an initial set of data, and then every day, say 5 o'clock in the morning, once you've received all the GA data from the previous day, you just run the stored procedure and it creates you a table, and then you can sit your Looker Studio or any other visualization tool on top of that table, and it automatically will update every day. So you don't have to pull any data. It just sits there, and your Looker Studio report automatically will update and point to that set of data. In terms of examples of the differences that Craig was mentioning, so this is this exact set of data, and it's a very small set of data. It's only running on my Play website, my side hustle, which doesn't get a load of transactions. It gets enough to hopefully make me a millionaire by the end of the year, but fingers crossed, we'll see. And what you can see from the interface, and by the way, this is an AA test, has 0 effort behind it in terms of implementation. The AA test, again, low volume, it's seeing a big difference. So obviously there's another warning of, don't bother A/B testing unless you're making over £1 million a year. It would be my advice, but there's also quite a big difference in the delta in conversion rates. So from the GA interface, I'm seeing about 16.93% difference, and from BigQuery, I'm seeing less than that, about 15.75. So you can imagine, as you scale up, when you get to the point where you're sampling even further, and you're actually in the point where I'd expect this to normalize and be very close to 0% difference at a high scale, but potentially in the sampled set of data, you would see a difference when you shouldn't be seeing a difference in this experiment. So that's me. Like I say, I will be doing a follow-up with the visualizations that you can do in Looker Studio. The main challenge that I'm working on at the moment is bringing in statistics into Looker Studio without buying a paid plugin, which is taking some time to do. But there are paid plugins out there that allow you to sit Looker Studio on top of BigQuery data and do the statistics. So they are available. I just don't want to pay for them. And that's me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Do we have questions that we want to ask Craig and Oliver?
Have you done any comparison with the data that comes in from Google Optimize and Firebase to BigQuery?
Google Optimize? You mean
because Google Optimize still exists in Firebase. So like if you were to set up Firebase, whatever property, and then you set up your A/B testing leveraging Firebase and then connect to GA. I mean, you wouldn't have to leverage the data in GA because you're using the cloud already at that point. But I'm just wondering if there's also a difference in the data when you're doing the A/B testing through Firebase into BigQuery. So
pass. I've never actually used Google Optimize, thankfully.
Don't know.
I think
I've refused to use Google Optimize. That's my story.
Yeah, it was never good when it worked in web. So yeah, I've even when it was available, I would have advised not to use it. I'm not too sure about Firebase specifically. It's one thing that in my day job we've talked about using instead of integrating our other tool into the app. But TBC, ask me in 6 to 8 months' time. It's an insurance company, we move slow.
Brian, any thoughts on this approach that Google put out for vendors versus passing the test data as regular events? And they provided a link in the chat. Hey, Brian, can you also put that in the TLC calls channel? Thank you.
So I do have another hack that is completely untested, but I've got a theory in that e-commerce events aren't sampled. So if you are able to send your testing data in e-commerce events, you may get it unsampled in the interface. Again,
good tip.
TBC, need to test it properly.
Yep. Brian, this was exactly the stuff that I'm talking about. It's still affected by the HLL, right? It says create an experiment integration with Google Analytics, right? There's a worm in this apple, which is not if you have more than 12K users. And like I'm reading the text and I'm not seeing a huge warning the size of a small country telling me that this bear trap is waiting for me. You know, I don't know. The vendors must be having situations where their clients are saying, you know, this data should line up a bit more, or you know, at least questioning it, and they're probably wondering. I'm just kind of curious. I think it's Google's problem to solve. I don't know how they solve it. I have some suggestions if they're open to it. But yeah, it's not good.
I think they'll have to open up a non-sampled event type, like e-commerce events.
Yeah,
that's the only way I think they can do it. But yeah, like you say, we'll see.
Oliver, your first slide where you talked about the pros and cons, or why you thought it was important to use an analytics platform at all to analyze the data. You kind of passed over really quickly because you said one of the solutions is, of course, to use the experimentation platform as your source. And then you went into why you thought that wasn't a solution, and why you thought it was important to use it.
I wouldn't say it's not. I certainly wouldn't say it's not a solution. Right? It depends how much you have set up in your experimentation tool already, and how much confidence you have in your implementation team. You know, you've got lots of implementations teams out there who are struggling to implement so many tools. So
also depends on those vendors being open about what their data model is, right? How do they count or time out sessions, right? If you don't know how those calculations are being made, right, then you're saying someone else is doing the data collection and I'm not really that worried about how they do it. I hope they're doing it right. You know, that's like a bit of a problem. So
I think it kind of goes against what I believe is a beneficial structure in experimentation, which is locking it down to the people who own the experimentation tool. If you have like a hit squad of experimenters who are optimizely experts, that's great, right? Use Optimizely. If you don't and you want to let lots of teams run experiments, whether there's a CRM team or an experimentation team, or devs with server-side tools, or you know a content management system administrator who wants to run experiments. This structure allows them all to run those experiments, but then have a single measurement methodology, which is that scalability. That's syndication of delivery, right? That's really beneficial. And it's suitable for some businesses. It's not for others.
That makes sense.
I do also think that the one point again that I glossed over because I rapped through things, so sorry about that, is that using a web analytics tool does open you up to look at every single dimension under the sun, which is a multiple comparison problem in itself, right? So it's great to have that capability. Can you really use it? Do you have enough data? Do you have enough volume to make all those comparisons? Should you make all those comparisons? Probably not. Yeah. Right. So
usually the way people think about segmentation is after they've run the experiment, not before.
Yeah. Which is p hacking, right? It's kind of,
there's definitely a lot of cherry picking of the data, and it happens when you have access to all the available sources of both metrics and segments, and they don't take into consideration the samples needed to do that.
Yeah.
Look, it didn't work, but it worked better on Kindles.
Right.
Right. On a Monday.
Right.
So it's good. It's a win. Let's implement it, right? Kindles, rejoice.
Which was the point that I was making. I mean, there's by definition a different type of, if your goal is to, refute the null hypothesis, that is just in time,
Yeah. And I kind of like to learn or burn, win or bin, whatever you want to call it, right? But if you end up looking into and diving into all of this stuff, you end up looking for those potential wins, and it might take you down, end up wasting a load of time down the garden path.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I spent like months and months down the rabbit hole of device ID and using proxy servers and collecting the raw data myself to work out how all the device identification stuff worked in UA, and it's the same in GA4. But I know which bits are useful now, which bits are not useful, which are actually collecting accurately the device things, and it's like a bit of a minefield, But it is really interesting data. But I've actually discovered that almost none of it, only a very small amount of those dimensions actually have any meaningful impact on stuff, right? I just looked down a lot of rabbit holes, but there just weren't very many rabbits down them.
Well, I want to thank you all so much. This conversation has been a very long time coming. And I want to remind everybody that we actually have 2 more January conversations coming. January 26th, Erin Weigel is going to join us. She's going to be finally sharing. We're very, very, very excited. Her design for, is it design for experimentation? Design
for conversion.
Yeah, design for conversion. She asked us all for advice on what she should name her book, and she's going to come. And you got it? You got a copy?
Impact. Sorry, unless you change it.
That's fine. She asked us what it should be named.
I've been impressed by the depth of kind of research that she's put into this. Even tiny little things like, I think me and Lucas had like a 5-day conversation just all about hypothesis and back and forward and stuff, and like, no, this is too complicated, no, the problem with it is this. And it was a fascinating discussion, but she was very keen to explore the whole thing in order to then make it simpler for everyone else to understand, not more complicated. We need the more expertise we gather. We forget what it was like when we were starting out, right? And we have to bear that in mind sometimes. So, and I think she's making some of this work really accessible in a way that I find very engaging. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it too.
And then for those of you that are going to be in Budapest, we're going to have our first time for the TLC live. We're going to be in Budapest at Super Week. And for those of you who can't join us live, we're going to be on Super Week TV. So on January 31st, I think it'll be like, I don't know, it'll be at 9:30 Eastern, maybe. I don't know. It'll be on the TLC newsletter. So be looking, and I'll of course share it all on the TLC Slack. But that conversation is about engineering and why we have to do more of it now than ever because of GA4. Gosh, thanks, sending everybody over to BigQuery. But our guest for that will be our own Jen Kuntz and Simo and Timo and Katrin Revant of she invented Datorama, and Ken Williams was going to be there, but couldn't at the last minute. And so Rick Dronkers is going to be replacing him. So it's just all-star cast, and we're going to have a great time. And so join us if you're going to be there live, and if not, join us on Super Week TV. So thank you all. Thank you so much, Oliver and Craig. Great conversation, and let's continue the conversation over on TLC calls. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.